Geeks and geekettes, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, comic fans all over the world. Welcome back to Ask Chuck Dixon, where you ask me, a professional comic writer of several decades' experience, about what I do for a living. And what I do for a living is I write comic books. Let's get to the questions right now. At M1 LST3R89. What do they call you at home? Chuck Dixon. Chuck, in one of your recent videos, you spoke critically of The Dark Knight Returns. Given all the influence that Miller's Batman book had on subsequent Batman and DC superhero stories in general, how come you didn't come to appreciate when you were part of the same dark trend in the 1990s that's inspired by The Dark Knight Returns? In some ways, the stories you did for Batman are quite reminiscent of The Dark Knight Returns. I beg to differ. Dark Knight Returns was not any kind of an influence on my work in 90s Batman, nor was it were we encouraged to be influenced by Dark Knight Returns. Dark Knight Returns was seen as out of canon, out of continuity, an Elseworld story, a what if, an imaginary story, and we weren't supposed to use it as a guideline for anything. And my natural inclination was to use my own influences. Denny O'Neil's Batman, the Batman Adam West television series, even though I had to keep that a secret from Denny, that was influential on me. Archie Goodwin's run on Detective Comics, which I mentioned in an earlier video. The classic Batman of the Golden Age. Lots of different influences, but not really Frank Miller. I read the Miller stuff. I saw what he was doing. I appreciated that he was thinking outside the box. It was, kind of a risk taken by DC Comics to try to expand the franchise into what they saw as a more mature, more adult version of Batman. But that was never me. I never, and I never went dark with Batman. There were still lots of laughs in my Batman stories. Some of them may have been gallows humor, but some of them were, openly humorous stuff going on. Kind of a blue sky Batman, not as blue sky as Mark Waid might write, but optimistic, not dour. My Batman, the Batman that I wrote, and Doug Mensch wrote and Alan Grant wrote, because we're all on the same page. He wasn't a brooder. He wasn't a victim. He wasn't a crybaby. And the world we presented was somewhat more optimistic, showing him as a hero, Batman as a hero with no feet of clay. Certainly fallible, certainly human, but we didn't go as far as Miller, particularly in the area of grotesqueries, of amping up every bad guy to a Hannibal Lecter level. A lot of other writers did that at the same time I was writing, and especially afterwards. But I really never participated in that. And I think if you're more familiar with my work, and the listeners here who are more familiar with my work will attest, I tell no lie. Frank Miller's The Dark Knight Returns was not a big influence on me. So what else can I say? J.D. Santabanez. Do you know the work of Argentine artist Domingo Mandrafina? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I'm familiar with a lot of Argentine comic artists, having visited there many years ago. Spent about a month in Buenos Aires meeting every comic book artist I could possibly meet, and there were so many. What's in the water down there in Argentina that you have so many fantastic comic book artists? I did not meet Senor Mandrafina. I wish that I had. Mandrafina works, as you can see, awesome storyteller, awesome draftsman. Works in a kind of 6-panel grid, straight up style that I absolutely love. This is pure comics. This is pure comics. And for period detail, characterization, panel composition, everything else, I mean, the guy simply can't be beat. Just excellent stuff. Probably best well known here in the United States for the Spaghetti Brothers, a series of gangster graphic novels set in the 1920s and 30s that were republished here, I'm going to say by Dark Horse. And I did read these and I enjoyed them very much. And I've read other volumes of Mandolfino work. I wish more of his stuff was available in English. But yeah, I am aware of him, and I'm a fan. Okay, King Kong FJ 4DK. Well, look who it is, Chuck Dixon. Did you think you could get away with it? Did you? Last night I was watching the old Adam West Batman, specifically the first time John Astin portrays the Riddler. And what do I see? Crossword clues, banquet, basin, the Riddler flooding a bank and using scuba gear to rob the vault. That's exactly what happened in Detective Comics Annual 8, Riddler Year 1. Okay, I don't know what to say here. You caught me, but you didn't catch me, in my mind. I remember very clearly watching the John Astin. I think he was only in one two-part episode of Batman playing the Riddler when Frank Gorshin either wasn't available or probably wanted too much money to return. And I don't remember. Seriously, I've not watched these episodes since they first aired. And I would have been 12. So I didn't see it again in reruns. And the only thing I really remember about these two episodes is that someone should have advised John Astin to wear some sort of support gear under his costume because, especially in the skin tight Riddler costume, I believe I could tell what religion the man was. So that's the only thing I clearly remember. Now I'm not gonna BS you here. Those elements apparently I haven't watched the episodes again, but I read a synopsis, and those elements that appear here in my Riddler Year 1 story, the crossword puzzle clues, and the flooding the bank vault in order to rob it, do appear in the Astin episodes. Were they buried deep in my subconscious? Repressed memories? I don't know what to tell you. But I did not, when I was writing this annual, consciously think of those episodes. And none of my editors and or the artist Kieran Dwyer ever said anything to me like this seems familiar or I've seen this before. So I'm going to say, yeah, I guess I'm guilty, but I'm not going to say I'm guilty of plagiarism or I'm not guilty of stealing. It was just an unconscious memory. As Nietzsche tells us, a writer uses his own and his friend's intellect. It's hard sometimes to tell where the ideas pop up from, but in this case, apparently I was inspired by those John Astin Riddler episodes. So yeah, I'm not going to run away from it. I'm not going to say, oh, it was an homage and I knew all the time. I really didn't. This came as a huge surprise to me. I'm going to have to rewatch the episodes now and see if it jogs my memory about this stuff. But I did watch them. So what can I say? What can I say except if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. It helps grow this channel. We're getting real close to 10,000 subscribers. They tell me at 10,000 subscribers, I will enter a different world. And you can enter it with me. If you've already subscribed, thank you. If you haven't, just hit the button down below. It doesn't cost a dime. Joshua Ignatowski, after you've written the first draft of a comic script, how many revisions have you typically done before sending the script to the artist? And which aspects of the script, dialogue, pacing, etc., do you improve with each revision? My longtime editor on Batman Project, Scott Peterson, once called me on the phone after I sent a script in and said, do you even read these things before you send them off? And I said, no. And he goes, I'm not surprised because of all the typos and things like that. There was no story elements that ever had to be changed very often. I was never asked to go back and do massive rewrites on anything. But yeah, I would write the comic scripts, get them out of my system, and shove them off. Don Daly once told me that my scripts were he never had to make any changes to my scripts other than correcting my spelling. Um, and the only other addition was he said when I split a page, like when I like page 4 continued on to another page, I didn't put continued on next page, so that the artist would know this isn't the whole page. There's another page of script for this comic page. And he said, you never do that. And I said, well, I'll have to start doing it. And Don said, no, please don't do it, because at least it gives me something to do on your scripts. I feel like I've earned my paycheck by writing, but now I do the continued on next page, because you don't want an artist drawing the whole thing and then because some artists go page by page in the script. They don't read the whole script first. And I don't want an artist thinking he has a 5-panel page to draw, turns the script page after finishing and finds out he needed another panel. So I do that. But yeah, I don't do a lot of rewriting on comics. I just sweat it out as I go along. Constantly asking the question that every writer must ask themselves all day long: is there a better way to say this? Particularly on dialogue. Is there a better way to say this? And I don't put down a line of dialogue till I'm happy with it. If I'm not happy with it, I'll lie awake at night worrying over it and then go back and rewrite it before sending it in. But yeah, largely I don't do a lot of rewrites. Now on prose, rewriting is the game. Rewriting is where it's at. I don't write, I rewrite when I do prose. Lots of rewriting. 3, 4, 5, 6 passes. And then it goes to proofing, another pass. Then it goes to final edit and another pass. So you're constantly rewriting in prose. And I'm not complaining. I actually enjoy rewriting in prose. Don't enjoy rewriting in comics because it means you have to shift panels and pages around. And it's like a formatting nightmare. Ophi. For years now, you have only bought, for years now, I have only bought 90s, 2010s comics from DC, not being interested in the new woke flavor. I recently seen, however, that DC versus King Kong versus Godzilla comics coming out and piqued my interest. Does it look good to you? Honestly, as a DC consumer for years before I stopped giving them my money and only buying back issues from resellers, I feel shame to even give them my money again. After destroying Superman with the prison you-know-what scene and numerous other things with iconic characters, thoughts? Is it just simply a gimmick? And if so, worth paying for, or give them a chance again? Well, I'm not going to tell you not to buy a comic. If you want to give them a chance, give them a chance. I have nothing personally against DC as a company. Obviously, I was at home there for a very long time, and I wish them nothing but well. I wish they'd straighten up their act. But I saw images and stuff from this. I'm not familiar with the writer on this at all, so I can't guarantee that it's a great story. But looking at the art, it looks like good stuff. And it also follows my suggestion for the entire comic book industry that they need to start doing imaginative and outrageous crossovers in order to bring new readers in and old readers back. And see, the strategy worked. The proof's in the pudding, my friends. Strategy worked. It piqued your interest. It piqued my interest. Yeah, I want to see the Justice League fighting kaiju monsters. Who wouldn't? And I would give it a chance. I would take a look at it and possibly lay my shekels down on a new DC comic, something I haven't done in ages. But, I'd like to see more of this, both at Marvel and DC, of them doing something to try to, get readers to look at their stuff. New readers reading comics for the first time, and older readers who've left the fold to come back. And the beauty of a crossover is if you're a Godzilla or King Kong fan and not a Justice League fan, you're still going to want to see it. Still going to want to check it out. If you're a Justice League fan, it's a must-have. So can't guarantee the story, but the art looks terrific, and pages I've seen look very engaging and interesting. So we'll see. Maybe I think this is the way forward. This is the only way forward to get readership back and find new readers is stunts like this, not announcing to the world on NBC Nightly News that this character is gay or that character is bi. That doesn't bring in new readers. This is the stuff that brings in new readers. This is Carnival Barker, come see kind of comics. So yeah, I'll be checking it out and possibly reviewing it here. Dino! Hey, Coach. Chuck. Been listening to the Levon Cade series on Audible and have been enjoying it very much. I particularly like the Tampa references, as I've been a resident in the Bay Area all my life. I do have a question about the book cover illustration. I'm sure as I'll continue to listen to more of the novels, I'll hear more of an in-depth description of Levon's physical appearance. That said, did you have any input on describing how he looked for any of the book covers? Does he look like you envisioned him looking? Would you say the book covers are the definitive look for Levon? Well, my Levon Cade novels, I don't describe him much, and you can read all 12 novels, and you're not going to get much more of a description than I've already given. He's a white guy. He's a big guy. He's over 6 foot. He has not an athletic build, but the build of a hardworking blue collar man, former military guy. He's got his military muscle still going on. I generally thought of him as having light hair, and that's how I described him to the publisher for the covers. He maintains a military-style haircut, short back and sides. And that's about it. The only consistent detail about Levon is his choice of footwear. He is generally in a pair of work boots, Timberlands or Wolverines. And that's really the only description I give that's consistent throughout the series, largely so that I can identify him to characters who don't know his name yet, don't know who he is. Because sometimes I'll write a chapter from the point of view of another character who has not yet encountered Levon. And when they encounter him, one of the things they remark upon, either in dialogue or in their own thoughts, is those work boots. So yeah, I've never. And the thing is, when you introduce a character to the readers, you only get one chance to make a description. And I eschewed making a detailed description of his physical appearance because I wanted the reader to picture him in their minds, create their own Levon Cade. And I think we all do that. And it's way too late after that first impression to get into physical attributes because the reader's already established a picture in their head. And I don't want to do anything to go against the picture they already have in their head. I read a novel years ago, and it was a good novel. It was engaging, and I really enjoyed it. And it wasn't until the final pages of the book that I learned that one of the characters was African American and gay, which would have, I wasn't picturing him that way. And yet these things were revealed long time after they would have been an important aspect of the character's motivations in the story. And ultimately, because I enjoyed the book, those details, those late coming details, were completely irrelevant to me enjoying the book. So anyway, yeah, if you want to describe a character in prose, do it early or don't do it at all. Rex Moss, whose voice do you try to make? Did you try to make Brian Salari? As I read him, I heard Jack O'Neill from Stargate SG-1 TV. Military, trouble with respect for the chain of command, impulsive, technical limitations. Yeah, that's a good comparison. Jack O'Neill. I just generally thought of him as that kind of character, the kind of maverick military guy with a mind of his own. Yeah, he's part of a order of command, but he'll often go outside his orders to do what he feels is right or most expedient. And if you've read Alpha Core 1, one of his expedient direct responses to a threat causes all the problems that happen in the final third of the book. But that's Brian Salari. He's human. He's fallible. He's not a perfect Mary Sue super being. He's impulsive, as you said. But yeah, that kind of character Maverick from Top Gun. I mean, we've seen these characters all the time. The and the rogue cop character. These streets aren't your personal shooting gallery. Those kind of characters. So it's in that school, but I didn't have a direct inspiration, just a general feel. Cool Guy 9000. Do you think noir is a genre that can be translated well into comics? Absolutely, absolutely, and has been successfully in the past. Film noir, a genre that grew up and began during World War II. I think it's all acknowledged by everybody that Double Indemnity, the Fred McMurray, Barbara Stanwyck movie, is the first true American noir movie. And then the genre grows, particularly in the post-war period, and then it's finally named by French film critics, is given this genre of dark and shadowy crime stories is given a name by French critics in film noir. But in comics, I mean, well, the French excel at it. Jacques Tardy's done a number of film noir comics, private detective stories, straight up crime stories, and well done with lots of local feeling. Alex Toth has played with film noir in both independent comics and when he was at Warren Comics, and because Toth was a huge fan of old movies, which for him weren't old because he had seen them as a young man. He was a big fan of the genre and constantly going back to it with costume characters and masked characters, and sometimes not. And of course, like Tardy, his attention to period detail and the rest of it just unexcelled. For my money, film noir was a perfect fit for any time Alex Toth wanted to go at it. Jim Steranko took a great shot in the 70s with a graphic novel called Chandler, presenting kind of private eye story that might have been very well at home in the 20s or 30s and 40s. But for my money, the best American attempt, the best successful effort at film noir, extended successful effort in the United States, was Stray Bullets by David Lapham. These are true film noir stories, crime stories. Now, film noir to me, and I differ with people about this, but I know I'm right. Film noir to me, a perfect film noir story is the everyday gone wrong. A phrase Cornell Woolrich, a great film noir and noir fiction writer, the writer of the story Rear Window is based on. He said that his stories were the everyday gone wrong. And in a film noir story, in a classic film noir story, you have a lead character whose life is going along normally. Now, he may be an ex-con, he may be a criminal, or he may just be, it might be the girl next door. But something happens in their lives that present them with a moral challenge, and they make the wrong decision. And as the story goes on, they lose more and more control of their lives. And that's a film noir story. That's a classic film noir. And that story framework can be bent and warped and changed and twisted and turned around and in a million different ways, which is what makes film noir movies and stories fascinating, because we put ourselves in the place of that person. We put ourselves in the place of this person whose moral compass is spinning, and what would we do in a situation like that? And the other thing about film noir, and a lot of people don't realize, is film noir wasn't like consciously invented in Hollywood. It was basically invented using the restrictions, budget restrictions. Most film noir movies did not have big stars in them. They didn't have big budgets. They had minuscule budgets, and they shot largely on location. Very seldom did you see film noir movies shot in a soundstage, and shot on the quick, on the sly, and a lot of times they didn't have the budget for a lot of lighting, which explains why film noir's imaginative use of shadows and tone and light sources and things like that, and stark contrast scenes, and things like that all grew out of these limitations. I mean, these tremendous Anthony Mann and Fritz Lang and Billy Wilder, and they're all using what they had available to them to tell the best story they could, and that's really where film noir is born, out of this sort of required level of creativity to make these things look good, look compelling, and work on the screen as stories. Now, that said, Torpedo, an excellent series by Abuli and Jordi Bernet, is not film noir. It's a gangster story. Just because it's in black and white and has guys in fedoras does not make it film noir. It is a gangster story. Same thing for Sin City, Frank Miller's Sin City. Not a noir story. It's a hard-boiled story. This is Jim Thompson, Mickey Spillane territory, and that's not film noir. That's not noir in any way, other than obviously the dramatic lighting effects that Miller uses throughout. But it's a hard-boiled story because there's no one here that represents anything like an everyday life. All of these characters are larger than life, badass characters, and that's not film noir. Christopher Cohen, have you ever written titles for two separate editors at the same time when they've been in the midst of a conflict and been subsequently caught in the middle or had to deal with passive-aggressive behavior because you've tried to maintain professionalism and not been willing to take a side? I just tended to stay out of these things, and I've always done that. Even to this day, I still hear, did you hear what so-and-so said about so-and-so? And I'm like, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to know. I know both people. I like both people. I don't want to get in the middle of, I'm not on, team this or team that. And I've never done that. And I've stayed above the office politics. Number one, because they bore me. Number two, because what good does it do me to take a side in a fight that I have no dog in? And I'm trying to maintain a professional career here. I want to get along with everybody. And largely, largely for the most part, the people I'm working with, they're not really friends. A lot of them became friends over time. A lot of them, I'd go on a long car ride with or have over for Thanksgiving dinner. That's absolutely no problem. But, you're not in this business to make friends. You're in this business to have a career. And I generally stayed above it, which probably explains some of my longevity because, I made a lot of enemies in the business. There's a lot of people in this business don't like me. I still don't understand why not. Some of it has to do with politics. Some of it has to do with, my level of success. Some of it has to do with the fact that I think, as Gary Kwapis said, I remind them of the guy who used to take their lunch money because, I'm a big guy, but I never took anybody's lunch money. I wasn't that kind of guy back in school, but these are comic book people, so they come from a different place and they're a little more sensitive. But yeah, and some editors would try to embroil you, like what side are you on, or let's turn against this guy. Like it's never me. I never liked that kind of stuff, either in my life or in my career, to take a side like that. So yeah, I stayed above it all. Not to say that I'm some sort of lofty character who didn't have opinions. It's just I didn't see the point of ever getting involved in those things. And yeah, it happened all the time. You had editors that just hated one another, and a lot of times I was working for editors who didn't openly disliked each other, and I'm working for both of them at the same time. But I think they learned early on, I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear anything bad about this other guy because I like working with him. I like working with you too. So can't we just leave it there? So there you go. And so often the editors that didn't like each other, the thing they didn't like about each other was that they were so similar. Do you have somebody like that in your life who you realize, I don't like that guy, and you realize after a while, he's a lot like me. I had an uncle like that. My wife finally pointed it out. The reason you really don't care for that uncle, he's a lot like you. Twin spin! It's a twin spin! Christopher, you're so lucky. You win absolutely nothing except that brief graphic. on the subject of time travel, what's your? Did we go back in time and talk about time travel and I forgot about it? Like I did the John Aston episode. Oh, anyway, on the subject of time travel, what's your favorite time travel story of all time? Mine's Heinlein's All You Zombies. That is a good one. That is a good one. And what do you think of alternative reality stories compared with time travel ones? Do you think they should remain self-contained? And what are your thoughts on one that attempt to interfere with multiple realities? My favorite is Time Machine. I saw the movie as a kid at a Saturday matinee. Blew my mind. Just fell in love with time travel from that point on. And then, time travel was sometimes an element on shows like Twilight Zone or Outer Limits. And they're always my favorite episodes. My favorite episode of Star Trek is Mirror Mirror. It's alternate universe versions of Spock and Kirk. So yeah, I was a kid when I saw Time Machine, but a couple of years later, I bought a copy of the book and fell in love with that as well. Still, for me, the best time travel story ever told because there's no, it's pure. It's got a great action line. It's got a great through line, and it really, the sense of wonder is there. Particularly when he leaves the era of the Eloi and the Morlock and goes far, far into the future. What a strange, strange planet he sees as the Earth comes near the end of its life. Just brilliant, brilliant. Wells was a freaking genius. Back to the Future. Gotta say Back to the Future. I know Bob Gale. I've pestered Bob Gale with dozens of questions about the series. For my money, some of the best time travel stories ever told from first of all, funny, entertaining, good stuff. But ultimately, what I love about the Back to the Future movies is 3 movies traveling backwards and forwards in time, dealing with alternate realities, dealing with changing the past in order to change the present and the future. And Bob Gale and Robert Zemeckis never drop a stitch. There's no plot holes here. They worked it all out. And from what Bob told me, there were actually nearly a fist fight on the set of Back to the Future because the crew was so confused about the story. Movies are not shot, the scenes are not shot in order. And the crew was so confused because they thought that Gale and Zemeckis had created like this mishmash of scenes that didn't relate to each other in any way. But of course, we know, having seen the film, that every scene in the movie makes absolutely perfect sense. But it's like, why are we going back to this? And why are we doing this? And there were arguments on set that they would have to explain, the principles of time travel. So for my money, it doesn't get better than Back to the Future from the standpoint of writing a time travel adventure that takes all of those things into consideration. All of the things that, when I write a time travel story, my wife says make me schizophrenic, is trying to keep it all straight. Now that said, I've written 6 books in my Bad Time series about a group of U.S. Rangers who become part of a time travel experiment and go all over the place. Ancient Rome, ancient Judea, the Cretaceous period, the early 100,000 years in the past in Nevada, the Franco-Prussian War, there's pirate stories, everything. Anyway, and I do deal here with alternate realities as well as time travel, because the conceit of my story is there's a bad guy out there trying to change history and create an alternate reality that he can rule. And his way of doing that is to send agents back in time to basically prevent the creation of the world's great religions, because he feels that if he can basically remove God from the equation of humanity, remove religious faith and a rule of law and a sense of order, that's a world he can take over and basically make himself God. And that's what's going on in these 6 books. But yeah, I mean, and I'm not a big fan of alternate reality stories, even though they're fun. Uh, but I kind of had to deal with it in this case. I mean, the conceit here isn't just, what if the Third Army in World War II showed up? You know, what if Custer won at the Little Bighorn? That kind of alternative histories really don't fascinate me a whole lot as a standalone story. But here I make that uh, element part of a larger tapestry, if that makes any sense at all. So there you go. Time travel. Promised my wife I wouldn't write anymore. Gentle Savage, have you ever been a fan of Deadpool in any way? And also, what are your thoughts on characters who break the fourth wall in general? I gotta say, I've never seen a Deadpool movie. Although I'll probably want to see this next one because it's Deadpool and Wolverine, and at least I know it's going to be some sort of action extravaganza. So it looks like fun. I didn't see the first two movies. I have never read a Deadpool comic. I understand the character. He's sort of a wise ass character who stands outside of what's going on. I've said before in previous videos that Deadpool is a stand-in for a comic book fan. He's basically what if a comic book fan was in the midst of the events going on in the comic book, and he would be commenting both to the reader and making asides. And I understand that's the appeal of this character, much like Harley Quinn. Harley Quinn is the same kind of character, sort of in the comic, but then sort of with us too in the story, and we see everything through their eyes. But yeah, like I said, I've never read. I mean, it's a cool concept. Obviously popular. I can't argue against the character's popularity. But there's a difference in fourth wall breaking. You can break the fourth wall in a way that your narrator is actually speaking directly to the audience. Ferris Bueller's Day Off, Goodfellas. There's a number of movies made this way. There's a difference between that and the occasional breaking of the fourth wall. The occasional breaking of the fourth wall where the characters in the story recognize that they are being watched by an audience should be used sparingly. And no one did it better. He may have been the first guy ever to do it. No one did it better than Oliver Hardy. During the Laurel and Hardy shorts and feature films, there was always a moment, and they never overdo it. They never overdid it, never overplayed it. There's always a moment where Oliver just reaches the end of his tolerance for what's going on and simply turns to the audience with this sort of helpless, withering, what the F look. And it's always perfectly timed and perfectly presented and never fails to get a laugh out of me. So Hardy was the absolute master. Others may have done it before him. I think there's a couple of occasions where Buster Keaton would turn to the audience in a silent film and what the hell? But Hardy was absolutely the master at timing that expression of loss. Just beyond frustration. Others, Marty Feldman uses it sparingly in Young Frankenstein to much effect. It's a cool effect when the character convincingly and spontaneously seems to turn to the audience and address them. It's neat. I don't know what part of the brain it activates, but it definitely has an effect on you when it's done right. And you're like, just for a nanosecond, you're like, he's speaking directly to me. And, the suspension of disbelief has to be total before you introduce a scene like this. You have to be completely engaged in the story and what's going on in order for that to happen. Moonlighting, Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd, which was a white hot show at the time it was on, did this often. As the series went on, they did it at least once an episode, refer to the fact, let the audience in on the idea that they knew they were in a television show. The characters knew this is all fiction. They say things like, remember that last time, or let's just do what we did last week. Those kind of remarks, which, was light and witty, once over lightly kind of TV show, and breaking the fourth wall really fit the mood. And as recently as Jim on The Office, who does a good job of turning to the audience. Of course, the conceit here is that which I think gets forgotten as you're watching The Office. Gets forgotten is that they're filming a documentary, which no documentary crew ever stuck around for this many years. But the conceit is that they know they're on camera, or have forgotten they're on camera, and every once in a while Jim will turn to the camera and let the audience in on the joke or share the joke with them, which effective use of breaking the fourth wall. Dan Perrin, I'm a huge fan of Birds of Prey throughout its pre-New 52 run. I'd love to hear more about how the book came about. How do you deal with Babs in the chair? I'm sure I'd heard you say previously you weren't a big fan of her being in it. How you felt about Huntress and Lady Blackhawk joining the team after your run. As you had experience with Huntress, was that something where you wish you had done it for yourself? In an early miniseries, I did have Huntress involved with Birds of Prey, but I never, and this isn't a picture of the Huntress, I know. I did make her a permanent part of the team because she wasn't a good fit in my mind, because Barbara was looking for people she could rely on, and the Huntress is anything but reliable. She wasn't going to follow orders. She wasn't, as much as Black Canary went off the reservation now and then. The Huntress was, I think Babs understood the Huntress as possibly a dangerous psychotic, and didn't want her permanently on the team. The other problem being that the Huntress had, made a play for Dick Grayson in the pages of Nightwing that Barbara knew about, because Huntress was infatuated with Nightwing for over a 4-issue arc where the two of them teamed up, and was very much aware of that. So really didn't want the Huntress around. So how the series came about, I've told this before. I'll give a truncated version now. Jordan Gorfinkel thought of the idea of putting Black Canary and Oracle together in an ongoing series, and I didn't see it. I couldn't. Why? Why would you want to do that? Black Canary had just had her own solo title canceled. It was like, does anybody care about Black Canary? But he insisted the chemistry between the two of them would be awesome, and with the conceit that he created, that Black Canary for a long time in the book would not know who it was she was working for. She wouldn't know anything about Oracle. She would just know it's a voice on the other end of the phone or the other end of a radio, giving her orders and setting up logistics and sending her on missions. And but then I relented, and I wrote the first special, that the one shot that Gary Frank drew. And about 6 pages in, I'm like, wow, he's right. He's right. These two have great chemistry. Everything about these two characters, their differences and their similarities, really come together to create a really cool team. And I thought it was a brilliant idea. But all hats off to Gorf. He's really the one that came up with this. And as far as Babs being in a chair, I didn't like the killing joke. But the fact that she was in the chair, John Ostrander and Kim Yale created the Oracle persona for her, where she got to work from a wheelchair and still become a vital member of the crime fighting community in the DCU. And I liked that idea. And I never wanted her to get out of the chair. I thought, well, once we're here, this is permanent. She's permanently wheelchair bound. And I liked writing it. We contacted people who were wheelchair, who were in wheelchairs, to get their opinions on what we were doing, give us advice. First thing, remove the handlebars from the wheelchair, give her a particular kind of wheelchair that made her more mobile, the possibilities of her learning martial arts, what martial art could she use from a chair to defend herself, everything else, so that she wasn't she was never a girl hostage. She was never a weak link in the team of Birds of Prey. So all of these things went into consideration. But no, I didn't hate the idea that she was in a wheelchair, because that's what we were dealing with. That was the status quo. That was the continuity now. I don't like the fact that she was ever put in a wheelchair, because I really don't like the killing joke. I think it was a misstep. And like I said earlier about Dark Knight Returns, I think it should never have been canon. But DC insisted that it was in this case. Um, the other thing about Birds of Prey, what was the other thing you were asking about? Lady Blackhawk. Yeah, I kicked myself. I should have had Lady Blackhawk. I, I, I didn't ever think about having Lady Blackhawk be one of the Birds of Prey. I mean, I had a number of other female characters. Catwoman, sort of cooperating with Birds of Prey in a couple of stories, and Power Girl or Power Woman, and things like that. But I wish I thought of Lady Blackhawk. All right, Rising Star Comics in Alpha Core #1. I was curious as to how much of the story was your creation versus how much was already conceptualized by Eric. In particular, the characterization of the Alpha Core members, as well as antagonists Michael Copper and Lillian Renashi, who briefly appeared before, were naturally fleshed out more here. Did Eric already envision the characters that way, or was it something you came up with? Eric very much gave me the basics of these characters, very basic. There was a lot to play with, and I just said, look, I'm just going to write them, and if there's something that I get wrong, because a lot of this was still in Eric's head, and that's the case all the time. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in a writer or creator's head that they never put down on paper because they think that, oh, you can intuit. And apparently I intuited it right because Eric was very happy with the way I wrote the two characters. And I sort of took them and they sort of have a love-hate relationship for each other. They're, the villains I'm talking about. Lillian and Michael they're just a pair of real a-holes. I mean, I wanted my goal as a writer was to make you hate them. They're the bad guys. My job is to make you hate them before the end of the story, and I really did make them, like vile and homicidal and uncaring, sociopath, psychopathic characters before the end, without going crazy and going over the top and everything else, because these characters are going to appear as recurring villains in this continuity. So I didn't want to show everything about them. The Saska sisters are going to, I think, take these characters to even more vile and disgusting heights in their stories, and and I leave a bit of mystery. As far as the storyline, he just said he wanted Lillian and Michael making trouble in Florist Park, and then gave me the 3 core characters of Alpha Core to deal with, and the rest of it was all me. I just had to make all that stuff up. So the ancillary villains like Billy Bob and Galvin, and that creepy psychic guy, that was all me. Populating the Eagle's Nest, their floating platform with crew members, that was up to me. And I asked Eric first. I said, the 3 of them don't just live in this thing and it flies itself, right? There's got to be crew. And he says, oh yeah, go ahead and create, crew, which was, turns out to be supporting characters that we can care about. But the plot line and everything else, what kind of trouble Michael and Lillian make, that was all entirely up to me. So, I was left to my own devices, which is cool. I mean, I just told Eric, I'm going to make a superhero police thriller. I'm going to make a lethal weapon movie in which the cops can fly and punch their way through walls. And talk to him about, Alpha Core's place in the police department, their tensions with regular cops, and everything else. And he's like, yeah, just go for it. And I wrote it, and I maybe got 1 note back. I really didn't get a lot of notes back on the script. Eric was very, very pleased with how it all went. And, I continue to work with Eric. I've got 3 projects in the can. I'll be starting a 4th in the next few weeks, and having a good time there at the Rippaverse. Another one from Rising Star Comics. Also, was the character of Wilkins entirely your invention? I liked him and his character arc at the end. Overall, how much freedom did you have to play in the Rippaverse sandbox, and how much was Eric involved in the creative process? I think I've answered that already. I mean, he's obviously the guy who created this world, so I bow to his judgment. I understand. I think I think the greatest contribution that Eric's made, among obviously the many great contributions in building what is so far an extraordinarily successful comic book enterprise, the greatest contribution was he set the tone with his ISOM books that this is a blue sky world. This is a world where heroes are heroes. Our brighter days are ahead of us. There's still plenty of optimism. there's an allowance for humor in the story. So it's just my kind of superhero story. Human characters that you care about and all the rest of it. So, but like I said, the rest I was left up to my own devices. The Wilkins character kind of came out of nowhere. I based his voice on my good friend Drew Geraci, who, like all of us, is a comic book nerd. But Drew talks about comics in a way with a depth of passion that not too many people do. And I kind of based Wilkins' voice on him. That Wilkins is starstruck by meeting these superheroes. And through that, we reveal some of Ingrid's inner thoughts and her reactions to basically a fanboy. Also, Wilkins is a character I like to introduce real, like, quote unquote, real world characters into my stories, and we can see these larger than life characters through their eyes. And to me, it grounds the series more in some kind of reality. Not obviously not the real world, but this created reality where there are other people than the core cast. Which raises the stakes. This is a vital. Forest Park is a vital living environment populated with millions of people, and Wilkins is one of them. And we kind of see the team through his eyes, and then if you've read the story, you learn that introducing Wilkins was a setup for stuff that happened later on in the story. And he plays a very, very pivotal role in the story because I think that's cool. The everyday guy who, in the end, gets to be the big hero. Not to spoil it for anybody that hasn't yet read Alpha Core #1. Hey, contact me at brunobookstore@gmail.com if you uncover any other places I may have stolen stories from unconsciously. Contact me at brunobookstore@gmail.com. I gird for your accusations, unfounded or not. But if you have questions, suggestions, pictures of the kitty cat or doggy, send them along to brunobookstore@gmail.com, the most reliable way to reach me. And while I have you read My Sister Suprema? You can go to ArcTunes and read My Sister Suprema as in weekly installments, or we are beginning the first issue of the series of My Sister Suprema graphic novels are out. You can order them through Amazon or directly through Archaven. #1 is Suprema's origin story, and Volume 2 will be following soon. These are European graphic novel formatted things that are larger than a regular comic book. It's 64 pages. And there you go. So hopefully I will see all of you down the road. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And see you next time.